Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Warcraft news. So, it's been another pretty darn busy week on the PTR, doubly so because this time Warcraft 3 has also been data mined. First though, Blizzard sent me 2 virtual tickets to give away, so if you'd like that, then check out the description below for a bit more info. They'll get you, of course, BlizzCon access plus the virtual items, and then as always, a massive thank you to our patrons over there. We're running a special on top of the regular Priest month. We've redone our first ever print plus another run of bookmarks, so that's all well and good, and with that, let's get into the news. Okay, so the most recent update to the patch 8.3 PTR has brought with it, well, far more Lich King hints. I mean, it really is pretty interesting. This is all on top of us seeing the allied race Death Knight textures last week, plus seeing encrypted voice files that seem to be a conversation between Darian and the Lich King, which is, again, fairly major. Now, this week we've actually got a little bit more. We have seen 4 new Death Knight Abin blade swords that have been data mined from the PTR build. So, we've got the Unholy, Burning, Freezing, and Crimson Blades of the Abin Blade. Yeah, Blade of the Abin Blade is a bit of an awkward name, but still, we've got an Unholy, Freezing, and Crimson one, so that's referring to the 3 existing Death Knight specs. But what about Burning? What's a Burning Blade got to do with the Death Knight? Well, I think it's far more in line with the art design of Bolvar, who of course was consumed by Dragonfire following the Wrathgate, so that's fairly interesting. Now, I hear that you all love it when I reach, and, you know, this was almost titled, wow, massive change, gargantuan class revamps in 9.0. Why? Well, number 1, never seen a Burning Death Knight, that's new. Number 2, the Freezing Blade of the Abin Blade is a 2-handed weapon. Now, Frost Death Knights have dual-wielded one-handers since their Legion revamp, and I mean, if we were going to reach even further here, we've seen no substantive class changes in Battle for Azeroth really thus far, and you know, even though that's with classes being one of the most heavily criticized parts of the game. Now, the thing is, their class designers are clearly still turning up for work in the morning, so, what if we're going to see Legion-like revamps after BFA and 9.0, and maybe we do get a 2-handed Frost back? Who the hell knows? Maybe Blizzard have had a hard look at themselves. Anyway, speculation wildness aside, let's get to something more reasonable, back to the Lich King. We've also seen a Frozen Throne portal texture. Now, sure, this was along with a bunch of other new portal textures, but it does kind of suggest that we're going to see a bit more action up there at the Frozen Throne in this patch, and then perhaps we'll also see those new portals appear soon on the PTR. So, you might be wondering here, well, what does the Lich King's involvement actually mean for World of Warcraft? Well, I would say the chances are it would tie into a Shadowlands-related expansion. After all, Bumsamdi does tell us that the Frozen Throne is a gateway to the Shadowlands. Hell, the entire Icecrown area, honestly, it's pretty darn mysterious given the throne being a door to the Shadowlands, the influence of just Yogg-Saron underneath the earth, and his blood literally being used to create all of those structures. There's something pretty wild going on there. So I think we'd have less of a Lich King expansion, and it's more that he would play a pivotal role in the expansion, like, say, Illidan did with the Legion expansion. Now, that's actually not it for speculative news, because we've also seen references to patch 8.3.5 appear in the data mining. Now, it's basically just some sound files, but their existence does somewhat confirm that patch 8.3.5 is a thing. Well, either that or 8.3.5 content has been moved back into 8.3, but just hasn't been renamed yet by the devs. Now, this isn't really a surprise, though, given the precedent set by Legion with its, I'd say, pretty darn successful epilogue patch. Chances are, you know, we will have dealt with N'Zoth, but the next great struggle in Azeroth will begin to be clear to our heroes. Maybe Khadgar will return from Karazhan and have new information. Maybe Vol'jin will return. Now, do note that by the time 8.3.5 is announced and we actually get to play it, well, BlizzCon will have already happened, and we will, of course, know what the next expansion will be. And because of this, I really doubt that 8.3.5 is going to be all that cryptic. I mean, we've even seen, say, the datamine dialogue between Laria and Turalyon regarding Sylvanas. Now, combine that with what Tyrande and her Sentinels are up to, and all this Lich King stuff, I think we've pretty obviously got overlapping plot lines here that I think would at least be pretty interesting. Personally, I suspect that we're going to end up dealing with death sooner rather than later. Now, given, say, Xal'atath being in space and the looming void threat that was teased in 7.3, I think a void expansion pretty much is a given, but I do think that with 8.3 giving us N'Zoth, Blizzard wouldn't want to go straight into a void expansion. I think they would think it would be overexposing us, like having, say, back-to-back orc raids through Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor. So, there you go, that's the fun speculation. Let's get into the general patch updates. So, first, I kinda lied, this is a bit speculative. There's a new currency called Echoes of Oblivion. Now, that sounds like a very typical Blizzard name, right? But there is something I would like to point out here. So here's what happens when Locust Walker saved Illyria in 1,000 Years of War. Locust Walker opened a void rift for them to escape. On the other side was utter nothingness, the void itself. Yeah, utter nothingness. Now, here is a description from Sylvanas' short story, Edge of Night. Sylvanas Windrunner, the Oblivion you seek is yours. Here's another one. Then Sylvanas felt herself being pulled away, her senses reeling. Everything disappeared and time stopped. Here's another one. Time was meaningless here. Her whole life seemed not a series of events, but a single instant, a pinpoint flash of consciousness in an infinite void. She saw only darkness. And then finally, the lurking oblivion filled her with terror. Now, I'd also note that she found Arthas' spirit there. So what if these echoes of oblivion, just as the name of a currency, are kind of a nod to this, well, realm that Sylvanas, Illyria, and Arthas seemingly found themselves in? If so, that would be quite the tease for the next expansion, as that Oblivion is the thing that has motivated Sylvanas ever since. Anyway, in other news, let's get down to the real news. Raid testing has continued with Rathian, Maut, Skitra, and Radden being tested. I mean, I'll say one thing, Blizzard are not slacking with the raid testing. They've jumped straight into it, and that does bode well for the future. But that said, they would have to be pretty diligent with their testing, because this is a 12 boss raid. It's actually the largest raid that we've got since Warlords of Draenor's Hellfire Citadel, so yeah, there's a lot of testing to do. Thankfully though, Blizzard are actually also going to be implementing a boss skip system that will work in line with how previous ones have, so if you kill a boss 4 times, then you'll be able to unlock the boss's skip. Overall, I'd say, sounds good, makes sense, so let's move on to assaults. We've seen more variants of the assaults on the PTR. Now, I was deep in my writing hole, writing the Sylvanas trilogy that we're sort of mostly the way through now, and while I was doing that, Wowhead were actually looking at the PTR, funny enough, and they made a great breakdown of one of the Uldum assault variants. Now, as we covered in our first assault video, the assaults clearly happen within a marked area on the map, and the one that Wowhead covered was in some ways different to the one that I played, but in a lot of ways I think would feel the same, because it ultimately did boil down to just filling up a bar by killing enemies and killing NPCs. And do note that this is not like world quests from previous assaults, this is just like a sort of a Mechagon style zone-wide progression bar. Overall, I'd say Wowhead's article is great. They did a great job of pointing out the side events that you might want to do for rep, things like the Amthet Fleet, the Unearthed Keeper, the Virnal Front, Beacon of the Sun King, the Solar Puzzle. These things are giving rep, so it incentivizes thorough play there. And overall, when you just step back and take a meta look here, well, it seems like Blizzard's plan is for there to be maybe 3 or so variants of each zone in existence. Maybe that's giving us a total of 6 different assaults between the 2 zones of Uldum and the Vale. Maybe it's more. And then, of course, you've got to add to that the N'Zoth invasion version, and of course the gameplay with the lesser visions and horrific visions. And really, with all of that, that's pretty much the patch's gameplay from a sort of a non-group content perspective. And you know what really is interesting? Like, I think my opinion is still mixed in this, as much as I really do love the solo horrific visions. I think they're actually incredible. Well, very good anyway. And I'm actually totally fine with asset reuse. I mean, I think that exploring more of Azeroth and going back to places that you know is a sane thing, a good thing to do in an MMO, but a lot of these things do just boil down to filling up a bar. Will the events just be static and people will kind of know what's up anyway, so there won't really be that much mystery? I kind of think that the genuine gameplay innovation here, I think it could be happening with the visions, but I do suspect that this world content is more just the best they could come up with, sort of given the restraints of patch 8.3. Indeed, I think it's pretty clear to me that the scope of 8.3 is primarily dictated by the production requirements of the next expansion. It's certainly an interesting situation. I'll say this, it's not necessarily one that I'm blasting Blizzard for. I mean, it's obviously a content reuse patch. I suspect that this is likely the smartest use of the resources that they have. I think they might be able to tie off Battle for Azeroth, giving people gameplay content. I think it'll serve the needs of the next expansion's development, and it's not going to leave us with a Warlords of Draenor-like content drought. Certainly, it's threading a needle from Blizzard's perspective, but if we were to see a December patch launch, January raid, and then an August expansion, I think that would be a pretty darn good managing of affairs. Next up though, let's talk about Warcraft 3 Reforged. There's been a lot of data mining. Data mining that's It's been interesting to go through, and I'll say this, I really can see how much of an artistic challenge this game must have been for them. Warcraft 3's graphics were very intentional, right? They were designed to work for the low polygon character models available at the time, and the whole game's art style was just developed around that limitation, and really the same goes for World of Warcraft. Now, with World of Warcraft and Reforged though, you're seeing them go in different directions in the future. World of Warcraft advanced the, I'd say, original formula, leaning very heavily in Blizzard's masterful texture work to deliver a game that really does look incredible in my view. Reforged though, well, I think its buildings look really good and are within the Blizzard style, but its characters seem, well, a bit too realistic. And I've got to admit, like, when you see them in context, I think they're really quite jarring. Something's just not working there for me. I think in isolation they look pretty cool, but I mean, it's odd. So, as far as we're aware, the brunt of the artwork here for this project has been done by a Malaysian studio, one of the ones that helped out on StarCraft Remastered. Now, this, like, outsourcing, that is industry standard overall, but when I look at these assets, it's like they're great in isolation, but they're a bit strange in a scene, and I think combine that with a clear delay in Warcraft 3 Reforged, and we've got a recipe for confusion. I mean, Reforged was announced with, like, Blizzard, like, doing pre-orders with a summer 2019 release date. That didn't happen. Of course, August 31st is technically the end of the summer, so something clearly has been going on here behind the scenes. And I think when you look at the assets up close, I mean, the buildings look really great, but the units themselves, I think they're just far too realistic. Great in isolation, but viewed in scene, I actually think they've departed from the look of Warcraft 3 and just Warcraft in general. I mean, to be honest with you, they kind of look like Raid Shadow Legends characters. You know, that mobile game that's just on every YouTube video these days? I mean, I probably get about 3 emails a day from Raid Shadow Legends, so I've seen that bloody thing too much. But overall, though, it's just a strange situation. I've got to imagine here that there's been, like, basic art oversight, but the Blizzard hasn't committed that much manpower to the project in terms of just getting the art assets made. I think that's maybe what it initially was. Maybe they've had to change that. I just kind of imagine that it's just the classic games team sort of handling the coding in-house and the assets externally. And I think when you compare the readability between this, Warcraft 3, and StarCraft 2, I think you can see that the Blizzard-led games are just a little bit more readable when it comes to the gameplay. So overall, to me, I mean, it does look like it's missing out on the Blizzard quality mark, I'll say that much, but again, it's early days, it could change. Now that said, I will say this, narratively, I'm interested in the project. It's going to serve as World of Warcraft's basis, and it's going to be in line with the Chronicle era lore, so we're going to see some characters have expanded roles, and I think that could be very interesting within the context of the current game, especially if we get, say, more old god hints when we're going through Azul Narub with Arthas, right? That could be pretty interesting. Seeing more characterization of Jaina, especially Sylvanas as well, and generally just, you know, some nods to modern lore. Maybe we get some hints about the Titans being less than pure good. Now that said, I think it might be a bummer to those who just want a pure Warcraft 3 experience, and I mean, I totally do get that. I admit that messing with the formula is risky business. Still, though, there is the potential for them to do something cool with it, and I think I'd be particularly interested in new campaigns. I mean, I'm going to suggest Blizzard a way to earn more money from me, and it's pretty much this. Like, I'd pay money for custom campaigns that were, you know, scripted by Blizzard, designed by Blizzard with voice acting, little cutscenes, you know, things like the Troll Wars, the Wars of the Shifting Sands. Those things would be really cool, and Warcraft 3 Reforged, if they can pull it off right at the base level, it could be a really good way for Blizzard to, well, quite simply, tell some of those stories and also make a quick buck, which seems like a win-win for us and them. But anyway, there you go. That's it for the Warcraft news. We've got nice little updates on the PTR. Crazy speculation with the Lich King. I know I went a little bit off the rails when I talked about the class stuff. I mean, come on. I've got to if I see two-handed frost and a new type of Death Knight sword. Realistically, though, I'm thinking that they're probably just like starter weapons for new Death Knights when the allied races get to be Death Knights. And I mean, for that, I think it's pretty simple. Something's going to happen. The Lich King's going to come in. He's probably going to be like, yo, dudes, I'm going to raise up some new Death Knights for you, and we'll probably be mostly buddy-buddy. Maybe Talia will be involved. It could be pretty interesting. And I mean, I do have a crazy theory for Arthas, and I've got a theory for how they can make Arthas return that's sort of in line with what I said there about Sylvanas and Illyria seeing that void, and Arthas also being sort of lost within that void, but that's definitely one I need to think a little bit more on, because right now, it is just a harebrained theory. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought about the things down below. If you'd like the chance of winning a BlizzCon 2019 virtual ticket, then check out the link down below. Cheers, I'll see you next time.